By midnight, the clip had been shared more times than any segment Kimmel had produced in the previous 4 months. Not because of what Kimmel said, because of what he played. The Washington Post had described it in 3 words that became their most screenshotted headline of the week. Spoke to the children about eggs and war. PBS had called it a surreal scene. The What a Day podcast had titled their segment, "Trump Gives Toddlers a War Briefing at the Easter Egg Roll." But none of those descriptions had done what Kimmel did at 11:08 p.m. when he played the footage. Not the edited version, not the highlight clip, but the full, unbroken sequence, in order, with timestamps, and then stood at his desk in the specific silence that followed and said, "I'm going to read you the topics he covered, in sequence, in front of children, on Easter Monday, while the Easter Bunny stood 6 feet away and did not blink once." He read them. The architecture of those 11 minutes, laid out in sequence, was the breakdown. No jokes required. The architecture of the Easter egg roll remarks, in the order Trump delivered them in front of hundreds of children in pastel dresses and bunny ears on the White House lawn. Topic 1. The rescue of a downed F-15E airman from Iranian territory. Specifically, they said normally, when you're in very hostile territory, and I don't think it gets much more hostile than Iran, they're capable fighters. Topic 2. The threat to destroy Iranian civilian infrastructure, specifically, without bridges, without power plants, without anything at all. Topic 3. The claim that Iranian civilians want to be bombed. Specifically, the time the Iranian people are the most unhappy is when those bombs stop. Topic 4. The assertion that 45,000 Iranian protesters had been killed, sourced from pretty good information. Topic 5. Joe Biden's autopen usage, addressed to an audience that included children carrying Easter baskets. The Easter Bunny, dressed in matching plaid, stood beside the president throughout. It did not move. It did not react. It stared forward with the specific stillness of something that has been placed in a situation it did not consent to and has no mechanism for leaving. Kimmel read the list. He placed it on the desk. He looked at the camera. "You've had your 5 minutes," he said. Not to Trump, to the list, to the architecture of it. "Now let's find out why you're terrified of one question." He held up a single piece of paper. "The question is this. At what point during the Bunny Hop segment did you decide to cover the bridge destruction timeline?" The studio's first sound was laughter. The second sound, arriving 6 seconds later as the room completed its full comprehension of the list, was something else. The first document went up on the screen. A child development framework. Not a political document, not a policy analysis, a child psychology publication from the American Academy of Pediatrics. The specific section covering age-appropriate communication about conflict and mortality, the guidelines that pediatricians use when advising parents on how to discuss war with children under 12. Kimmel read one paragraph. He placed the document on the desk. He did not editorialize. He looked at the camera with the specific expression of a man who understands that the document has done everything the document needs to do, and the only remaining task is to let the room absorb it. The second document. A compiled record of the specific claims Trump had made during the Easter egg roll remarks. The 45,000 protester figure, the civilian infrastructure threat, the most unhappy when the bombs stop characterization. Each claim placed beside the publicly available documentation for the same claim from State Department briefings, Pentagon press conferences, and UN monitoring reports covering the same period. 4 claims, 4 right column entries. The distance between the columns was not subtle. Kimmel read 2 entries. He placed the document beside the first. "The documents are on the table," he said, and his voice was at the lower register, the one that had nothing to do with comedy timing. "The timeline is on the screen." He looked at the list. "The witnesses spoke." He looked at the camera. "Your move." A door near the production wing opened. A woman, a licensed child psychologist, 14 years in practice, who had been asked to review the Easter egg roll footage and assess it through the specific lens of her professional framework. She did not speak about politics. She spoke about the footage, the specific content, the specific setting, the specific audience, and the specific effect that content delivered in that setting to that audience would produce according to the research literature she had spent 14 years working within. She named the studies. She named the specific categories of content, graphic threat language, explicit casualty figures, civilian infrastructure destruction framing, that the research identified as producing measurable stress responses in children between ages 4 and 10. She described what the Easter Bunny's static presence in the background of the footage represented from a child's processing standpoint, a cognitive dissonance marker, an object that signals safety placed beside content that signals danger, and the specific confusion that combination produces in developing minds. Trump's Truth Social account posted during her testimony. She absorbed the notification without visible response. "I'm not betraying the family," she said, looking at the document rather than the camera. "I'm betraying a lie. The lie that this was a normal moment that didn't require a professional assessment." The second witness came through the same door 70 seconds later. A man who had worked as a senior communications advisor on 3 previous presidential administrations and had specifically managed the protocol framework covering how presidents communicate at public events attended by children, the specific guidelines, informal but professionally established, that govern topic selection and language register in those settings. He was not there to discuss politics. He was there to describe a professional standard and whether the Easter egg roll remarks had met it. His voice held before the first sentence. A brief gathering, the specific preparation of someone who has been in institutional settings his entire career and is about to say something that those settings had always required him not to say. He described the standard, he described the remarks, he described the gap between them with the flat, unhurried specificity of a man reading a measurement rather than making an argument. When Trump's press secretary issued a statement during his testimony calling him a swamp creature, whose institutional framework was itself the problem, he absorbed the characterization with the patience of someone who has been in rooms with difficult material for a very long time. "That belief," he said, "cost me more than any lawsuit ever could have. The belief that staying inside the framework would eventually fix the framework from within." The studio's final sound was the slow, convergent wave. Hands coming together because the architecture of the evening had arrived, without announcement, at a place where sitting still was no longer the adequate response. Kimmel looked at the camera. He looked at the list on the desk, the 5 topics in sequence delivered on an Easter lawn to children in pastel dresses and bunny ears, with a plaid Easter bunny standing 6 feet away, unblinking throughout. He said nothing for 3 seconds. Then, "Happy Easter." The studio gave a sound that was not laughter and was not silence, and lived in the specific space between them, where the most honest responses tend to arrive. Trump's counterstatements came in the sequence they always come. The architecture list, the 5 topics in sequence, was reproduced on 4 network broadcasts before midnight. No commentary, no framing, each entry in its own line. The Easter Bunny photograph placed beside it on 3 of the 4 broadcasts. The word architecture appeared as a segment title on 3 platforms beneath the frozen image of Kimmel reading from the list. By midnight, the clip had crossed 36 million views. The Easter Bunny, unblinking, standing beside the bridge destruction timeline, became the image. Not because anyone chose it, because it was already the image. The people who subscribe to this channel don't come for drama. They come for the moments nobody else is willing to show. Join them, subscribe, turn on notifications. The next truth is already on the table.